I want to talk to you today about something that, to me, is one of the quiet, unmistakable signs that the Torah is divine. And it's not a miracle, it's not a prophecy, it's actually something much simpler. And honestly, something that people usually treat as a weakness of the text rather than its strength. Here it is. The Torah refuses to sanitize its figures, its leaders. Its heroes are not flawless. Its God is not flat. And I think that's not an accident. I think that is the whole point. Let me explain what I mean. When people compare religions, they often reach for the one that sounds nicest. Pure love, pure peace, founders and leaders and prophets who never falter. A God who is endlessly, uniformly kind no matter what. And I'll be honest, for a long time, I was quite compelled by the idea that that was a more spiritually advanced picture, a purer picture. But I've come to think it's actually the opposite. Because, think about it, life is not like that. Life is unfinished. It's contradictory. It's full of people who do real good and then, in the very next scene, fall apart. People who feel 10 different things in a single day. That's what being alive actually feels like. So here's my question. If a book is claiming to be a guide for life, not a fantasy about life, not a picture of some already perfected world, but an actual companion for people living in this messy, unresolved one, what would we expect that book to look like? I would argue exactly like the Torah. Let's start with the people, the leaders. Now, I'm not going to stand here and litigate every layer of these stories. With a lot of these moments, the deeper sources show that there's real depth and reasoning behind what looks like, on the surface, just simple wrongdoing. But with that caveat, take the brothers selling Joseph. There's real jealousy there, real hatred. The text doesn't hide that. And the commentators also show us that the brothers believed they were dealing with something like another Esav, a genuine threat to the family's future, not simply acting out of spite. Both of those things are true at once. And look what the text is showing us. It's not hiding it at all. In full colour on the page, we're seeing the good, the ugly, and everything in between. And this is worth sitting with for a second, because these aren't minor characters. These are the men who become the 12 tribes of Israel. These are considered righteous men, the very foundation of the nation. And yet the Torah doesn't flinch from telling us that these same men, at one point, hated their brother, sold him out of jealousy. Years later, standing in Egypt, not even realizing who they're speaking to, they turn to each other and say, Aval Ashemim anachnu, we are guilty regarding our brother. Unprompted, in real time. The Torah doesn't need a narrator to hand them their guilt after the fact. It lets them arrive at it themselves, the way real conscience actually works. Slowly, and sometimes too late. Take Jacob, Yaakov, one of our 3 patriarchs, a man the tradition considers so central that we call ourselves the children of Israel. His name, that's what his name becomes. And what does the Torah tell us about him? That he deceived his own father, dressed himself as his brother, lied to Isaac's face, took a blessing that wasn't given to him directly. Now, let me be clear, the tradition says that this was the right thing to do. Jacob was meant to receive that blessing. His mother orchestrated it because she understood, on a prophetic level, who each of her sons truly were. So this isn't a story about a patriarch doing something wrong, and yet it's still not simple. Because right after, the Torah tells us that Esau cried. He let out a great and bitter cry. This is Jacob's brother. And when he realizes what's happened, that's when he does this. And that cry didn't just vanish into the text. God heard it. There's a teaching that ties that very cry, generations later, to the Purim story. That Esau's descendants, through Amalek, through Haman, are ultimately undone when Mordecai cries out in the streets of Shushan. One cry, centuries later, answering another. Which tells you something remarkable. Even when the outcome was right, even when the blessing belonged with Jacob all along, the Torah still takes the human cost of it seriously enough that it echoes through the rest of Jewish history. Nothing here is weightless. not even things that were done for the right reasons. And that's exactly what makes these morality stories in the first place. Not despite how true to life they are, but because of it. A story only teaches you something usable if it looks like actual life. A hero who never struggles doesn't teach you how to struggle. A patriarch who's never conflicted doesn't teach you what to do with your own conflict. These stories land precisely because they're honest. Now compare that for a moment to how most religions' founding stories work. Most religious traditions, most national origin stories, they tend to smooth their founders out. They need them untouched by failure, because failure would undermine the whole thing for them. But here's the thing, that isn't a bigger claim about holiness. If you think about it, it's actually a smaller claim about what human beings are allowed to be. Now here's where it gets, to me, really interesting. Because the Torah doesn't only refuse to sanitize its people, it does something parallel with how it describes God. And I want to be precise about what I mean, because it's not the same claim. With the people, we're talking about real moral messiness, real jealousy, real deception, real failure. I'm not saying that about God, but what I am saying is this. The Torah doesn't give us a God who sits outside the mess, untouched by it, watching from a safe distance. It gives us a God who is in it with us, who feels the weight of our choices, who experiences something like tension, like grief, like regret, right alongside the very story we're living through. Real, felt presence. A God that is almost telling us he grapples with these moral dilemmas and mixed emotions just as we do. In fact, some say that that's part of why he invites some of the great moral leaders, Abraham, Moses, into moral discussion with him about these issues. I'm going to destroy Sodom. What do you think, Abraham? Because he's a living God that feels these tensions just as we do as well. In fact, if he created us to feel these tensions, and we're created in his image, well then what does that tell us? There's a picture of God that a lot of people find more comforting. Endless, flowing, uniform kindness. No matter what you do, the feeling is the same. Steady, unmoved, untouched by your behaviour. I want to push back on that picture. Let's talk about unconditional love, because I think we need to unpack this word. And I think unconditional can get used in two different ways, and I think we blur them together. Unconditional commitment means the relationship doesn't leave. You don't get abandoned because you failed. That is real, and that's the goal. But that's not the same as unconditional emotion, a feeling that never moves no matter what you do. Emotion is a response. It's supposed to be a response. If my feelings towards you is identical no matter what you do, if I'm just as warm when you embrace me as when you betray me, I haven't achieved some higher form of love. I've actually stopped reacting to you. I've stopped seeing you. That's detachment wearing the costume of devotion. A parent's commitment to a child should be unconditional. The child should never have to lose that. And that same parent is delighted 1 hour, furious the next, terrified the hour after that, depending entirely on what the child does. That emotional movement isn't a flaw in the love. It's the proof that the love is actually paying attention. And this is exactly the picture of God that we get throughout the Hebrew Bible. Not indifference dressed up as peace, real responsiveness. There's a line in the Talmud in Brachot where it describes God himself praying, and his prayer is that his mercy will overcome his anger. Sit with that. That's not a distant, static being. That's a description of internal movement, of something like tension, held within the divine itself. Elsewhere in the Gemara, in the Talmud, the sages describe God weeping in a hidden chamber over the exile of his people. And in another passage in the Talmud, in Sukkah, there's a teaching that every single day God regrets having created the evil inclination in the first place. A kind of ongoing daily reckoning with the consequences of his own creation. The God of the prophets is not apathetic, literally without feeling, but the exact opposite. A living God. A God whose very essence includes being moved by what we do, grieved by it, angered by it, delighted by it. And once you see it that way, the anger you find in the Hebrew Bible stops looking like a flaw to apologize for and starts looking like the clearest evidence of investment. A God who could not be moved by us would be a God to whom we simply didn't matter. Indifference is what you give to something with no stake in the outcome. Reaction, real felt reaction, is the vocabulary of investment. And there's one more piece that I want to bring in, because I think it ties the whole thing together. Right in the middle of the Joseph story, while the brothers are in turmoil, while Jacob is sitting in mourning for a son he believes is dead, the Torah suddenly interrupts itself. It stops telling us about Joseph and pulls us into a completely different story. Judah and Tamar. It feels almost like an intrusion, like the text lost its place. And the ancient biblical commentary, the Midrash, asks exactly that question. Why here? Why now? In the middle of the family's lowest, most painful moment? And the answer it gives is remarkable. While the brothers were consumed with what they'd done, while Jacob was consumed with his grief, God was, in that very moment, occupied with creating the light of Moshiach, the Messiah. Because it's from that union, from Judah and Tamar, that the line eventually leads to David, and from David to the Messiah. And here's what makes this even more striking. The union itself doesn't look holy at all. On the surface, it looks like exactly the kind of thing you'd want scrubbed out of a sacred text. Judah doesn't recognize her. He thinks he's approaching a prostitute on the roadside. It's only afterward, when Tamar is nearly put to death and produces the proof of what really happened, that the truth comes out. That this was never illicit at all. That she was fighting at real personal risk to keep this family's line alive the way it was supposed to continue. And Judah himself says it. She was more righteous than I was. That is the moment the line to Moshiach actually begins. Not despite how compromised it looked, but through it. And it doesn't stop there. Generations later, that same line runs through Ruth, a non-Jew, a Moabite, an outsider, someone with no birthright claim to any of this at all, who converts and joins herself to the Jewish people out of nothing but loyalty and love. She marries Boaz, a descendant of that very union between Judah and Tamar, and from them comes David. The line to the Messiah isn't a clean royal bloodline handed down in a straight, dignified path. It's built out of a night that looked like scandal, and a woman who didn't belong, and God building the redemption of the world through both of them anyway. Think about what that's telling us. The redemption of the world wasn't being prepared off to the side, away from the mess, waiting for everyone to clean up their act first. It was being woven directly into the middle of it. Into the jealousy, the grief, the guilt, the family falling apart, even into a moment that looked from the outside like scandal. Precisely there, which is really the whole idea of this whole video, said one more way. It's not despite the mess that any of this works. It's through it. We don't get to Moshiach by first becoming people who don't struggle. We get there by being exactly what these figures were. Flawed, feeling, reactive, human, and working through it anyway. So bring it together. A Torah that won't sanitize its heroes, and a God who won't perform flatness. I don't think that's a text that fell short of some cleaner ideal. I think it's a text that understood exactly what it was for. A guide for a real, messy, unfinished world doesn't pretend the mess isn't there. It doesn't hand you a cast of flawless people to imitate and then leave you alone the moment you fail because you were never given anything to hold on to in your own failure. It doesn't hand you a God so smooth and uniform that your actions could never actually reach him. It walks into the mess. It shows you a Jacob whose choice carried real weight, whose consequences echoed for generations, brothers who fall and then slowly feel their own guilt, a God who prays for his own mercy to win. And it shows you that redemption itself gets built out of exactly this material, not around it. And to me, the fact that a book given thousands of years ago already understood something this subtle, that the more honest picture of a relationship is also the more loving one, and that the mess isn't the obstacle to redemption, but the very place redemption grows from. That is not a coincidence. That, to me, is a sign of something greater at work. Not despite these people, but through them. And maybe, if we let it, through us too. So if you look at your own life right now, or at the world around you, and all you see is mess, don't let that discourage you. Lean into it. Lean into God's word, because that messiness, worked through honestly, might be exactly what we're here for. Just quickly, we've all heard of heaven, hell, and the afterlife, and at some point I'm sure you've given it some thought, but the Jewish view is radically different from almost everything you've been taught, and once you hear it, it will change how you understand life itself. Have a watch of the trailer for our new JTV Plus documentary called Heaven, Hell, and the Afterlife, and you can watch the full film right now by clicking the link below in the video description. Across the world, the afterlife is described in simple terms. Heaven above, hell below, the devil waiting to tempt you, and a humanity born in original sin. But Judaism tells a story that is older, deeper, and far more hopeful. Less obsessed with fear and more rooted in purpose. A story where the soul is not born guilty, but born noble. Where the body is not the enemy, but the partner. Where the devil isn't God's rival, but his assistant, because Judaism has no second power. Where hell exists, but not forever. Where heaven exists, but not as the final destination. And where the real end of the human story is resurrection, not escape. Judaism views history as a mission, not a mistake. Other civilizations teach that we are here to earn our way into heaven. Judaism teaches that we are here to bring heaven down to earth. And to understand what happens after we die, we first have to understand why we're here in the first place. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to reveal the Jewish vision of life after death. One of the most misunderstood ideas, but if understood correctly, can transform your very understanding of life itself. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.